Hello again, it's your old friend Theta, the Monotone Messiah, and today we're going to talk about in-game roles. If you play a team-based FPS like Onward, it's important to have a framework for how each team member should behave during a round. While these kinds of roles have been present for a long time in other FPS esports like CSGO, the Onward competitive scene is, as of right now, so undeveloped that many players still aren't aware of them. As usual, we'll start with high-level concepts, then bring it back down to earth with some specific examples. But before I begin, it's worth mentioning that these roles are not rigid, and they often change throughout the course of a match. In many cases, roles aren't even explicit amongst the players involved, and are instead descriptions of tendencies that emerge during gameplay more than anything. With all that out of the way, let's begin with an overview of each role, starting with the Entry Fragger. The Entry Fragger, or Entry for short, is the player on the team or within a unit who leads the charge on offense. Their whole job is to be the tip of the spear, the flashpoint of aggression to ensure that the offense imposes their will on the defense. This is the player who will pierce the defensive perimeter first and create problems for the defense. Top flight entries are the kinds of players who end up with lots of highlight reel moments as they come into quick, furious contact with enemies on every round. If nobody runs as the Entry Fragger, or the Entry Fragger is too timid, then the offense will never take the initiative from the defense, and the chances of the offense winning go down significantly. A good entry needs to be incredibly adaptable and able to hit quick, accurate shots in tight spaces because they're going to be fighting in the middle of absolute chaos. It's also critical that the entry has a solid understanding of the most powerful angles for whatever area they're attacking. If they don't, they'll run in and get shot before there's any hope of them doing any damage. That being said, if an entry goes down, that's fine. Their job isn't to kill everyone on the other team, although that's nice when they do. Their job is to make sure the offense maintains an aggressive, threatening posture. What matters above all else is that the entry does not give up their life for free. If they run in, cause confusion with the defense, and at least get refragged, then they've done their job. It's best to have an entry who won't die right away, but that is part of the job description on some rounds. Who should get the refrag when the entry goes down? The answer to that is the support, who runs behind the entry and does everything they can to make the entry's life easier. The job of the support player is to run behind the Entry Fragger and cover them as they make their push into the defense. They cover any angles that the entry isn't dealing with and often toss utilities such as smokes or frag grenades to give the entry room to do their job. Support players also play a key role in shutting down lanes with pre-fire so the other team can't use them and the rest of their team can move up and around those lanes. Above all else, the support player's job is to make sure that if and when the entry goes down, that loss is not in vain. Good supports know how to keep just the right amount of distance from the entry to get a refrag when the entry dies, and capitalize on their work getting into the defensive perimeter. If they're too close to the entry, they risk getting killed during the breach, and if they're too far away, they risk being too late for a refrag. The key to understanding this relationship is how the two roles shift. Whoever runs in front is the entry, and whoever runs behind is support. When the entry goes down, the support is now the entry. No matter what, the offense needs to keep pushing, and it is the job of both entry and support players to ensure that happens. Next up is the Lurk, which is often referred to more generally as a flanker, although the two roles are not identical necessarily. Unlike the Entry Fragger and support, the Lurk can play their role on both offense and defense. On offense, Lurks take their own path and get picks on the defense while they're distracted by the main attack, or when the defenders rotate. This has a devastating effect on the other team's morale. On defense, Lurks are the players who take on slightly detached and riskier positions, either in the flanks or pushed into the center. Their job is to create fear and uncertainty within the offense by surprising them through either ambushes or aggressive, well-timed flanking maneuvers. Lurks are often the last players up, especially on offense, and one key detail that gets missed by many who try to be Lurks is that you should never be the last one up without having contributed anything during the round. An isolated Lurk who has done nothing to bring his team closer to victory can potentially do damage, but they're far more likely to fail than succeed in those cases. Quality Lurks are guerrilla fighters who know when and where to pick fights that allow them to leverage the element of surprise. This forces the other team to pause during critical moments and try to evaluate their plan, which can spell the end of the round for them if they're not careful. New players love to play the lurk position because flanking can produce some spicy plays that look good on cast. However, not playing this position well can end up being devastating. One poorly executed flank can decimate an entire round, or even cost a team an entire map when they get capped on far from objective. The biggest mistake I see from lurks is greed. They get a kill or two and then get overwhelmed by bloodlust, which leads them to making errors, which in turn lead to a quick death. If you play the lurk role and you get even a single kill while lurking, you've done your job. Rotate into a safer position and enjoy the numerical advantage your team now has. Much like sniping, I recommend new players stay away from the lurk role until they have the fundamentals of communication, teamwork, and basic map knowledge down. To be effective as a lurk means you have a very high level of awareness, and you should know not only the most important angles on your flanks, but the timing required to deliver the biggest late round punch possible. Next is the in-game leader, or IGL for short. IGLs are the shot callers on a squad, and their job is to make sure the team stays coordinated throughout a round. But they aren't coaches. They're in the trenches with everyone else, and they need to perform as well. It's common to see an IGL also take on the support role since they need to have exquisite map knowledge and expert-level communication skills to lead effectively. There are certainly some IGLs who play Entry Fragger or Lurk roles, but more often than not they're running in some kind of support hybrid role because they need to have visibility on what's happening. If they run as a Lurk, they may not have enough situational awareness to be effective, and if they run as an Entry Fragger, they might die too early. Like the other roles, the IGL is fluid. If your designated IGL goes down, everyone needs to pick up the slack. A team that can't survive without their IGL is a weak team, and therefore every player needs to be ready to transition to this role the moment the designated IGL dies. What matters above all else is that the IGL can think on their feet and help everyone on the team adapt to the conditions of the round. A rigid thinker who can't make adjustments on the fly should never be your designated IGL. Finally, there's the control, which is a position that only applies to defense. The control is a player whose entire job is to make sure a critical angle is covered around the objective. They are the designated last man standing in situations when the rest of the defense goes down, and if they end up getting a lot of action, it's usually not a good sign. The control is not a particularly glamorous position since they're hanging out in an area that simply cannot be breached under any circumstances. This means everyone else on the defense is watching other angles where there's a much higher likelihood of a fight, which in turn means the control has a lower probability of shooting their weapon, much less getting kills. That being said, the control is an incredibly important role for every defense, especially on rounds where a cap would be the end of the map or the match. The control needs to be an excellent communicator and have very high tablet awareness because they need to keep track of what's going on around the objective. Once holes start opening up, the control needs to have a solid idea of where to rotate so the objective remains protected. I've seen plenty of teams lose rounds or even entire matches because they either didn't use a control or the control wasn't disciplined enough to maintain overwatch of the objective at a critical moment. As always, I like to go over footage to create some sort of concrete example of what I'm talking about. To begin with, this is the very first round of our recent match against Raptors. If you're watching this far in the future, this is Season 11, Week 4. Anyway, we are right now set up in what's called a 2-1-2. So a team of two, a single lurk, and another team of two. Going in for the north attack are me and Mono. In the center is the Lurk, who is Wookie. And then there's Potato Bot and James Boak over in the west. Facing off against a defense that's very tightly locked down. As you can see, they have 4 surrounding the objective and then a single Lurk in the form of soldiers hanging out here in sort of this southeast tunnel area. This round is not a perfect example of how all these different roles can play, but it does highlight some very important moments and concepts that I think are useful. And from this point forward, I'm going to skip around a little bit just so there's not a lot of boring moments as everybody gets set up. Starting with Wookie, who is playing the Lurk, he's doing what good lurks do, which is watching for other lurks and watching for a pushed out defense. And he's doing that while waiting for the rest of the team to get in position. As you can see on the map, he's still sort of in the middle here, and we are not ready to make an attack yet. And now you can see another, I guess you could call it a package or a team or a unit, whatever, of Mono playing Entry Fragger and me behind him playing support. And you'll see as we come up here, we're watching complementary angles. You know, every now and then you will see the occasional looking in the same direction, but we've played together enough and we've trained ourselves enough that we're generally not. So as you can see here, I'm watching this way, Mono's watching directly onto the doorway. This is how Entry Fraggers and support players should be coordinating. The idea is that one is attacking and one is supporting, or at the very least, they're both watching different angles in case somebody pops out on them and a refrag is required. Now you're seeing us start to create a situation where we can begin attacking our designated area. First thing we do is we throw a smoke up and start suppressing this door. Mono is popping in and out here to tell me if I'm hitting the door or not because my smoke was a little bit shallow. But the point is that as a support player, I am making his life easier. He gets in, he gets to where he needs to go. He's checking these angles, which we were designated to clear, and almost gets team killed by Potato right there, which is nice. But comes around here, clears the front door, and now we know that we have this exterior area secured. A very important moment happens off screen in this round. It happens right here. It's when the defensive lurk in the form of soldiers kills our offensive lurk in the form of Wookiee. At this point, James, operating as the IGL, calls for me to run to where Wookiee is, or was, I should say. At this point, he has figured out, okay, we have this outside area secured. We don't need 4 people stacking around here. It makes defending much, much easier. So James calls for me to go. He also is going to go into that area, and this changes the entire nature of the attack. I've skipped ahead a little bit, and you can see that the people who were attacking originally are all waiting on the outside. Mono and Potato are sitting there waiting because we are going to coordinate. Neither of them has a support behind them. They could potentially team up, but then they would just be going through the same doorway. That doesn't make sense. So we're adapting to the situation. In some sense, we're all sort of playing Lurk at the moment until we can coalesce and time our attack correctly. And as a support player, I knew that there was something going on down here because Wookiee had died nearby, so I pre-fired down this lane. Again, a lot of what a support player does aside from refrag is deny access to certain areas. And having the LMG in particular makes that easy because you can just pre-fire lanes and make sure a defender doesn't push out on you. Skipping ahead a little bit, this is still a 4v4, but as you can see, inside the objective room, there are 3 defenders. I would argue that they are in some sense all sort of playing control because this is one of these objectives where you can't really watch the whole thing in one place. It's very similar to Kiat on Bazaar and a few other objectives that now exist, where one person has to constantly be checking multiple angles. So they're doing their best here, trying to create a sort of triangle around the defense, and that's why we need to sweep in and attack them in multiple angles because they are watching multiple angles. And now you can see our breach, and I make a little bit of a mistake here. I have too much distance between myself and the Entry Fragger, who is James in this case. So Rypick hears him, comes and shoots him. I start storming around the corner, start creating noise because I know the rest of the attack is now on. And then I storm through the door and get the refrag eventually, so I did somewhat fulfill my role as a support player. And now we're encircling them, and they have no choice. So we're all sort of supporting each other. We inverted their triangle defense and created a triangle offense against them. I skipped ahead to the next round to highlight a very important moment, which is there's not really any action that happens here, but you can see Mono watching down into this area near the objective. I am not watching the same way he is. I am waiting for some kind of lurk because in the last round we knew our lurk had been taken out by a lurk, and at that point it does not make sense for everybody to be looking the same direction. You really shouldn't be looking the same direction the vast majority of the time anyway. And so anytime you're running with an entry and support setup, one person should be watching one way and the other person should be watching the other. And of course, the other on the backside, like I'm doing right here, should be watching the most vulnerable areas. Mono has to know as an entry that his support has his back. that he can look down that line without any worry about somebody coming and shooting him in a place where he cannot respond. This is another moment where the support role is well highlighted. We're throwing green smoke into this area, which is critical for watching the objective, so we're blocking visibility for anybody coming from the north, and then I just send pre-fire through this lane. I can't see anything, and in fact, at this point, I had no idea I just gotten 2 kills. So once again, an incredibly important role of the support is just keeping those lanes locked down, and maybe you get lucky like I did, but more often than not, you're not going to. Skipped ahead a little bit on the same round, and now we're trying to coordinate an attack from the north, and I end up making a mistake. I did not get the timing down correctly. I thought the attack was already on, and I pop out here. Now, I'm just doing a shoulder peek, but I don't do it well enough, and I get killed. Now, this is why having entry and support setups are so powerful. I had to do this on my own, and because I went down and nobody was near me, a refrag was not possible. In fact, they didn't even know where this kill came from. So the 2 that were left in the north, which was James, Boak, and Mono, they had to attack this from one direction with no information about how I had just died. So again, if you're going to play more individualistically, it's incredibly important that you have your timing down correctly and you're communicating, because situations like this can happen. And that's why many teams will run with entry and support, or even cluster most, if not all, of their team in one area, so that if one goes down, the refrag comes out nearly instantly. I've skipped ahead to the last map of the match to highlight what happens when control positions are not played properly or if they're taken advantage of. In this case, if we look at the map, we can see there is still sort of a lurk down in the south, that's soldiers, and we also have 2 defenders near the objective in the form of Distorted and Marksman. Marksman's far off in the west, actually right next to my position, although I didn't know that at the time, and James has come in under smoke cover right to the north side of the objective. This is a key moment because Marksman is not in a position to watch the objective from a critical angle, Soldiers is in a position to watch from a critical angle, and Distorted has a lot of it covered, but he doesn't have the area right here. And if James gets in without being spotted or heard, then that means he can get right to this area and cap before anybody can do anything about it or even see him. And in this moment, I spot Distorted, so you can see my laser coming in, and now there's suppressive fire on his position. This is because we knew we had an opening, and if I put suppressive fire on him, at the very least, it would prevent him from rushing over and stopping James, even if he had seen it. All that being said, you can see I just keep firing. Soldiers rotates back in, but now he is facing off against me. And in fact, I think Marksman looking more towards the inside of the objective, but still not watching that specific spot. And as you can see, there's just no control in place at the moment. Soldiers facing out at me, trying to take me out. Nobody is watching right here. And in fact, you can get into this position without being spotted. And without the control, nobody has a view of James's position, and a cap comes out. Finally, one more highlight about how to play control from our Season 11 Week 3 match with SEAL Team Bravo, which wasn't casted. I'm playing control on the Chinatown objective on Subway. As you can see, the objective is now totally smoked, and the angles that I need to control are no longer visible. I have no choice now but to run into the smoke. The reason for that is I have to maintain control over the objective, and if I can't see the areas I need to control, I need to get to a place where I can at least run into a defender. I get injured and then realize Wookie and I are looking the same way, so I reload, heal, and then spin around to spot the capper and narrowly win the round. Alright, that's all I've got for today. I hope this video has been useful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. You can also come ask me yourself in my Discord, which is invite.gg/ThetaVR. This is Theta, signing off.